Hi, my name is Kenderlaway Buga. Welcome to my channel. I'm a watercolor artist based in Portland, Oregon. I love to go out on hikes and find my inspiration pictures there. So today we're going to go back to Silver Falls State Park and take a look at that same waterfall and the same painting that we were looking at last week. Last week I started by taking a piece of watercolor paper and tearing it into pieces and gluing it back together and starting that way. So here's where that piece is today. So there's a black piece of paper behind it, but you can see where I've torn the paper. You can see that even torn bits are showing a jagged edge, mostly on top and bottom. I'm starting to regret that I didn't make the sides more jaggedy, but anyway, here's how it looks. I'm super pleased because I find that it feels a lot like me and the kind of work that I do, but it's also, it started as a very big departure from the way I would start. More on this in a little bit. While I was waiting for that to dry, I decided to open up a box of Inktense pencils that I bought a couple months ago at Blick Art. This is what it looks like. There went Inktense. And I realized after watching one of Melanie Chadwick's videos that these are pretty different from watercolor pencils in that once they set, once you've colored them on the paper and put water on them, they set and they're done. They don't re-engage with the water later. And their colors are more intense. So I did something I'd really never done before. I did it's called swatching. And again, because I saw Melanie do this and I thought, oh, okay, this is what artists do. They check out their colors and they see what colors they are. Because as she repeated so many times in the video, the color that you see on the end of the pencil is not at all the same as you see it once it's engaged with the water on the paper. So I chose to, while I was waiting for this one to dry many times, I started on a new painting. And this is exactly the same subject matter. It's the same waterfall, although it looks quite different. And I made the pool more like the pool really is in real life. But this is all starting with Inktense pencils and the Stabilo black pencil. And I used a masking tape. This is just a, what's that called? Those little tapes that you can buy, washi tape. And so I'm gonna have a very clean edge on this painting that isn't, of course, on this other painting that's torn up. So let's get to it. I want to show you some of the techniques that I used on these paintings, and I think I'm going to talk about Monet and a couple of other things while we look at the video. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. I so appreciate that you watch and comment and give me all of the good vibes. This is such a good time. It's such fun for me to put these together. All right, let's get into it. And here we are in the painting part of this video. Here I am pushing back the liquid frisket that I applied in our last video. This is a great tool if you really want to keep the paint off of a piece of your paper while you're painting over the top. It comes off pretty easy, although you do need to press a little bit. And there's my inspiration video from our hike. That is one of those waterfalls at Silver Falls State Park. And as you can see from my painting, the painting here is not very true to the original. It is an imaginary takeoff. As I go along with this painting, you're going to see a lot of the techniques that you've seen in some of my other videos. I'm going to use some gouache to make that waterfall and the river going out of it even whiter than it is. I want to bump up the contrast between the very dark hillside and the water, and it turns out great. I really like that. You can see that I'm using just the lid of a yogurt container, and the tool I'm using is the wall of the yogurt container. I took the actual container and cut it with my like a box cutter into little strips, and it makes a nice tool that I can also throw away when I'm ready to. It's nice and stiff. It has a little curve to it, which maybe isn't the best thing, but it seems to be fine. And there's my other favorite tool, is one of my favorite sticks. I just wanted to integrate that gouache into the blue a little bit better, so you can see me adding a bit of water and then really pushing so that I can get some glimpses of that blue color underneath the white gouache. So as you watch, I wanted to talk about what came up for me when I was looking at these two very different paintings that I've produced in the last 2 weeks. And they both feel very much like Kendra paintings. And so I thought this is very interesting. Two paintings that feel like me, but they both feel very different to each other. And so what I thought of right away was Monet with his haystacks. You may know about this. He made 25 canvases over about 6 months, from the summer of 1891 to the spring of 1890. Summer of 1890 to the spring of 1891. He'd also made 5 earlier haystack paintings. This is kind of a remarkable thing because haystacks don't appear to be a very inspiring piece of the landscape, but clearly he had something that he was looking at. He was really looking at the sun and the shadows, I suspect. So there's a little bit from Wikipedia that I wanted to read for you. Monet settled in Giverny in 1883. Most of his paintings from 1883 until his death 40 years later were of scenes within 3 kilometers or 2 miles of his home and gardens. Monet was intensely aware of and fascinated by the visceral nuances of the region's landscape and by the endless variations in the days and seasons. The stacks were just outside his door. So there you have it. What's right outside your door that could be the next haystack that you could spend 30 paintings on? I don't know. But where I live in Portland, Oregon, I see the same thing. I could go within 2 miles of my house and find endless possibilities. And I bet it's the same for where you live. I think what it takes is an artistic eye to really look and see and be curious about what's going on around you. And that exploration, I think, is what really makes excellent paintings. Did you just see what happened there with the waterfall? How I applied that white gouache directly to the paper and pulled it down with my little card. And for me, the contrast that just jumped out between the white waterfall and that sort of purple hillside just made the painting, like, I don't know, 45% better. Very scientific allocation right there, 45%. So now what I was looking at is that it gets very dark over the top of a waterfall, or it appears to be very dark, right? Because the water of the waterfall is all churned up and white. So I thought I'd play that up. The thing that's really happening at the top of that waterfall is that there is a bridge that one crosses to come down to this level. But I left that out on this painting. On the next painting, where I'm more realistic, I included the bridge. And so it's fun to look at these two paintings side by side and kind of try to think, is the reality worth it? Is the little bridge that awesome? So you can see that I bumped up the contrast on the left side of the waterfall right there. And again, that just started to really bump those values and make it look that much better. Now, this whole left side of the painting is the thing that needs a lot of work. I've laid down some colors. The sun is actually hitting that side of the valley. In the real picture, the waterfall is in shade. That sort of cliff that is the main part of my painting is in front, and you can see where I've indicated actually on the cliff the shady side versus the sunny side. But down here, we're on this left side of the painting, we have a lot of sunshine coming on some very mossy trees. And so a little bit later in this video, you're going to see me drawing in some trees and trying to work with the contrast of the mossy trees and the sort of sunshine that's coming down. I really like this gesture of an explosion sort of at the top of the waterfall, this colors that are shooting up. And don't ask me how I chose to put that blue there. I love that I put it there, but that is very much left brain, or right brained activity where I just have an impulse and I just feed that impulse right away while I'm doing the painting. And the other side of my brain that I'm using to talk to you right now, it doesn't know why I did that. So here I've zoomed in on the film because I love how that little bit of the Stabilo pencil reactivated and fell down my waterfall. The only thing I wish is that it had stayed that vibrant. It actually gets quite diluted by the gouache paint that's still there, and also the gouache reactivates with water as well. You see how when it's dried, it's a little more gray, but I still love that drippy texture in a waterfall. I think that might be another exploration to do, is to just concentrate on dripping paint down a piece of paper and making a waterfall out of it. When my husband looked at this painting earlier, he saw a cardinal, not the bird. He saw a Catholic cardinal. If you know the kinds of hats that they wear, you will pick him out. It's funny, you know, the more abstract you go with a painting, the more your viewers can see their own images. And it's one of the cool things about starting to abstract things. I know for those of us like me who tend to the realistic, and it's hard to push into the abstract, it's really rewarding when someone looks at the painting and sees their own image, their own new thing that I never saw. So now here's what I'm doing, and this is, I think it was kind of intentional, or at least in retrospect, it feels intentional. From somebody I picked up this idea that if you have a red color in a painting, the red is so very strong to our eyes, right? It's the color of blood. And so it evokes all kinds of feelings. And so if you have red somewhere in your painting, it's going to really shift the viewer's eye. So if you have red in 3 different spots that are separated, you know, not close together, it will help to do that thing of moving the viewer's eye around the painting. So it's a semi-conscious decision to create those red lines that I'm covering with my hand right now. There we go. Down there in the lower left, because I have my cardinal's hat up in the upper right. And then you're going to see another spot of red coming up pretty soon to help to move the eye. And, you know, like right now as I'm filming and I'm looking over at the actual painting, it does, my eye does get caught up in this painting. It does feel like it bounces around and moves around and likes to look at the contrast and likes to look at the difference of colors. So something is working. What I've just done there is I wanted to keep the contrast, that deep contrast between the black side of the hillside on the edge of the waterfall and the white waterfall, but it needed to kind of gradate out to the sunlight. It felt a little too stark, or at least I wanted to, fan it out a little bit. So I did it with a little bit of a mossy green. It appears maybe gray right here, but it really was a mossy green. And then this little activity that I'm doing, I felt that maybe increasing the contrast again at the river would be a good move. And because on the other side of the river, it really reads so very beautifully. But I don't know. For me, the jury's still out on whether that was a good move or not, because there's something very lovely about the yellows and the greens just riding up right next to the river on the side that we're on. But, when I'm working on this stuff, I just follow every impulse. I mean, really, honestly, I don't overthink things too long. I just keep going, because otherwise I would never get anywhere. I just think, this is just a painting. It's just a piece of paper. I can always cover something with gouache. I can always start again. So let's just go. Let's just put some stuff down and see what happens. So at times there are things that I would say are possibly mistakes. But the only way I know if it's a mistake is if I do it and look at it, and then perhaps pack that in my backpack of skills for the future. You'll notice in my paintings, all of them really, there's this huge emphasis on mark making, on different kinds of marks, right? Those lower right hand grasses are just lines shooting up. And then here, what I've done is I've activated the paper by putting some clean water on it. And I brushed that area that I'm looking at here and that area here. And then I'm just using this Inktense pencil to create a texture and to create that color and the shape, really, but in a different way than just painting a flat color. So I liked that so much that I decided to do it on the other side of the river as well, but in a different way, but in the same way, but a different way. So here I decided to choose a different kind of mark making and a different kind of a shape, kind of a triangle popping up. And then I liked that so much that I thought I should go back across the river and do it again in green, even though there was already some mark making there, but I thought maybe I should do a little bit more. I think this has to do with my architectural training and the drawing and sketchy nature of that. I think it is part of my style that comes from my history. I love the drawing side of it. And then this is really another way of mark making, actually. I decided we need another tree coming up through there, and so I draw the outline in a mossy green color, and in fact that was another mossy green that I'm drawing the lines through after I've activated the paper with some water. And then here finally is another way. This is not making marks. This is now the calm part of just applying glazes. And I've come to really love this. There we go with the other red that I was telling you was going to happen. I love this abstraction of having different colors bounded by the shapes made by the limbs of the tree. Somehow our eye makes up for it and makes it make sense. So that's it for that one, and now we're on to this next painting. All right, washi tape is getting applied. Of course, this is totally speeded up. I'm never this fast. You can put any old kind of tape, painter's tape, artist tape, washi tape, as long as it sticks well enough, but not so well that it's going to pull that paper back off when you finish. So you see here, I've started in a very different way. It's a very sort of careful drawing sort of a way where I go in with these Inktense pencils and sort of gently put in color bit by bit. And activate it and forever get surprised at how much yellow is in that green. I kind of bounce around my paintings like this, where I go from the left to the right, to the top, to the bottom, because I'm waiting for the part that I just activated to dry. That's really the only reason why I do that. I know that some painters will paint progressively through a painting, like they won't have disjointed bits, but I guess I'm impatient and I want to keep working on a certain painting. But of course I know that if I keep working on the wet part, I'll just mess it up. So it's my way of staying out of the wet part. So here's another mark making of, there's some bushes on the side of the hill that I thought I would imitate with some marks. And I noticed yellows in there. So I'm very much still looking at the painting or the inspiration picture on my iPad while I'm doing this. In fact, I'll pop it right up here for you so that you can see it again, a little refresh. There we are. So you see how the pool that the waterfall is falling into is big and round, and you can see in my drawing here how I've sort of turned it. I've turned it to face us. So I didn't keep the original perspective. I turned it to face us. I wanted to explore it. And I liked how compositionally, like I want to explore the color of it. Like you see the different colors in that pool. And compositionally, I feel like it gives a nice weight to that side of the painting, to have the pool sort of facing us more. Does that make sense? Than it does in real life. So I would say perhaps this painting, even though it's the same inspiration, might be a little more about the water part of the waterfall. The waterfall, the pool, and the river are more prominent here. And perhaps the hillside is going to be less prominent. I'm not really sure because it's not finished. This painting is maybe, as I'm looking at it over in the corner, I think it's maybe only 40% done. It needs a lot of work still. So I go along, putting in color with the Inktense pencils and then activating it with water with a clean brush. Here is a technique I don't think I've shown you before, but I use this a lot. I take a birthday candle, the white kind. I don't know, I have a whole pack and there's a whole bunch of pink ones and yellow ones, and I don't know if they would rub off the wrong way, but I just use the white ones for rubbing onto paintings, and it forms a bit of a resist. Depending on how firmly you have rubbed that candle wax into your painting. And it is a material that you won't be taking off of your painting. It just stays with the painting. It doesn't, to my eye, it doesn't add or subtract kind of anything. There's no residual texture except for what you can see the paint surrounding the the bits. So like if you have a very rough paper, so this is a cold press piece of paper, which is like medium texture, I would say, for watercolor paper. And so of course the candle wax rides on the top sort of ridges of the paper more, of course, than the parts that are down below. So your pigment, when you apply watercolor or whatever kind of color, goes down into the lower ridges, and the top part stays white, right? Because the wax is there. If you used a really rough paper, because there's a kind that is a very rough paper, I think you would get even more pronounced texture. And then of course, if you used a hot press paper, which is the kind that's very smooth, you wouldn't get really the kind of the same texture, because it's a very smooth paper. You would get a different kind of a look. So it's not only the wax, but it is the kind of paper you choose that will dictate your outcome. So there we are, being very careful about where I'm putting some colors so that we can have that indication of water coming down the waterfall, but keeping most of it white from the very beginning this time, instead of applying gouache over the top. Although who knows, perhaps I will apply gouache here too, but I doubt it. I think this painting feels a lot more calm and more soft. And I think that the use of gouache, at least the way that I apply it with a stick or with a piece of plastic, creates more energy and more contrast. I suppose I could just paint it on like a regular piece of paint and make it soft as well. But, now here you see those circles are coming in again, and I activate them by drawing the brush over that. I love that because it's not the actual plant that I'm drawing there, but it is an indication, like a abstraction of that plant. And trees, of course, these are not super abstract with the trees. Creating that dark ridge at the top, because it is what's there, but it also helps to define the top of that hillside nicely. So you can see the shapes that I've laid in, the big kind of oval of the hillside, the somewhat smaller oval of the pond that kind of fit together in a jigsaw way, and then the river that sort of sweeps underneath it. Oh, here we are at the end already. Thank you for being with me today.